everybody, welcome back to the Claremont Classic Garage. We're back working on the old 2016 Dodge Grand Caravan here. Our exhaust pipe came in so we can get back to work on this thing. And I'll add the same disclaimer to this video that I did to the first one. This is not a step-by-step how-to of how to change a transmission in a Grand Caravan. Tons of videos about that already out there. I'm just doing like a vlog of my experiences doing it and some things that I've run into and some things that you might want to look out for if you ever do this. And it mostly just for entertainment purposes. So here's the piece, the front half of the exhaust that solves our problem, right? Now the actual, if I went to the dealership, this pipe is $800. It goes a little further back. It goes around a corner here, and then there's a flange clamp there. That's fine. You cut it behind the resonator, and then you just clamp this on there. This solves two problems. Number one, this thing disintegrates. And number two, apparently the factory resonator cracks around here. So this will lick both those problems. So all we got to do is get underneath there and do some cutting. So we got to cut that clamp there and push that pipe off. And then we have to cut this right there, right behind the resonator, and we should be good. You can see here, this is an original pipe from one of these vans, but it's had a few ugly repairs done to it over time. But you can see here, the back end of it, it's got more than enough meat for this thing to slide over. So what we're going to do, rather than cut the pipe that's on our van, we're going to take it out in one piece, because that's got like a ball flange on the end there. It comes apart easily. We don't have to worry about fighting with it. And then we'll have our original pipe complete and intact, and we can probably at some point just cut this part out and weld a new one in. So we've got our original pipe that we can put back on it in the eventuality that this one fails. These things do have a life expectancy, these flexible joints. They're just not that great. Originally, a lot of these front-wheel drive cars had like spring-loaded ball flanges at the front of them. And I don't know why they went away from those. They worked great, you know, and you never had these endless failures with these braided flex joints. Oh well, you know what they call that? Progress. So we're back here just in front of the back wheel. And you can see here, this is the flange clamp that we need to, we'll just get in there with a zip wheel and cut the bolt. We've got a new clamp for this. And then we'll get it busted off at the front, and we should be okay. Here's our old one. Look at that. Once I got this, you can see here, I got that clamp cut with the zip wheel, and then I just I pushed this thing off with an air hammer. I was able to push on the clamp. The clamp is welded to the pipe. I was able to push on the clamp rather than the edge of the pipe because I didn't want to wreck that, right? So that looks like we did okay there. You can see there, that's just wasted. Glad we got that. All I got left to do is pull this hanger off. And then we're going to go ahead and get our new front pipe on the van, hung in the hanger. And then we can go ahead and install the rear piece. I bought a new flat clamp for this because I don't want to use a guillotine clamp, because that it puts a groove all the way around it and it will damage the pipe underneath. And this is something that I'm expecting we'll probably have to change again one day, depending how long we keep this van. So we'll do it this way. So when you use one of these, you have to cut a little slot in the pipe, but you have to cut it in the way that when you slide it over, the end of your pipe is, like the inner pipe, is beyond it, or else you'll get a leak right there, eh? So we've cut it in about an inch. That'll be good. The inner pipe goes into about there. And we've got this cleaned up now. and I've already checked it slides right in there. That we cut off that other old pipe we had. This part of it is, well, it's just junk. It's so cobbled up, we'll just scrap that. So I got to go ahead and get this thing under there, and we'll see what it looks like. I also measured carefully and cut this alignment notch in it. You can see there our old pipe has one because there's an alignment pin on the inner pipe or the Y pipe that we have to attach this thing to. And I made this one a little bit wider either way, just to give us a little wiggle room that we may need in case I've got that off a little bit. All right, there it is. You can see there it's hung in the hanger. You can see the hanger is kind of aiming a little bit back, but I think once we get the K-frame and everything and all the mounts back in, it might stand up a little bit, but if it doesn't, it's no big deal. They may have just welded it off a little bit, the bracket. Not too worried about that. And you can see here, it's gone right down and lined up with our little alignment pin there. Glad we made the hole a little oversized, but it's all good. Now we can go ahead and get this clamp tightened up, and we can put the back half of the pipe in. Now we can start putting the rest of this thing back together. First thing I got to do is get this axle in before the K-frame, because it's easier to get at those 3 bolts on the hanger bearing there. And then once I got that in, then we'll get the K-frame up. So I got the K-frame lifted up under there, but it's just kind of hanging loose from the bolts, so I can move it around so I can get at all the stuff on the top. So far I've got the rack. I've got the steering rack bolted to it and torqued down. Same thing with our sway bar. I installed new rubber bushings on the sway bar, so that's done. Now, I got this. What a pain in the neck. There's a heat shield that goes over this end of the rack and the sway bar bushing to protect it because there's a lot of exhaust components over here. But we got that done. Now what I've got to do is this here, the backside motor mount. That's got to get in on the other side. It goes up over the steering rack, and you have to fish the bolts in. And then the real fun part of this is once it's done, there's a heat shield that goes over it. But I think that's after the K-frame is up and in and the bolts are tight and everything. It's slowly coming back to me anyway. What's important when you put the subframe back up is you don't tighten the bolts. You don't just ram the bolts in, right? So what happens is the top of the bushing leaves witness marks on the bottom of the frame rail. And when you put this thing up, you just snug the bolts a little bit, and then you whack the K-frame around with a hammer until you get these 4 rubber feet lined up exactly with the witness marks that were there before, because there is a little bit of play, and it's kind of like set precisely at the factory when it's built. And then once you've got them lined up exactly perfect how they need to be, we torque the bolts to 120 foot-pounds. That's all done. So now we can move on to the next step, which is getting this. You can see here the engine rocketing and rolling. So we got to get the bolt through this motor mount here. That'll get the engine on the right angle of dangle. And then we can put the heat shield. There's a big heat shield that goes over this. We can install that. Okay, so now that we got the engine on the right angle, because we put our mount in, I went and put the exhaust together. You can see there where it's joined. We got you could buy the clamp. Walker makes the exact clamp because you inevitably have to cut the original one off. There's a bit of it under the card over there. So we got that done. Here's our joint here. It's a little bit of a sloppy looking joint. We'll see how it is. If I find that it's leaking here, we'll just weld it around. For now, it can have the clamp on it. Yeah. And you can see there where it goes up over the, whoops, where's the flash? Where's my flashy flash? There we go. You can see there where it goes up over the K-frame. Yeah, that all went pretty well. If anything, we got that fixed. Next, we got to get this guy in. And they call this the fore and aft cross member because, well, guess what? It goes fore and aft. And this is the mount that goes on top of that to the front side of the engine. But when I was taking it apart, this captive nut is supposed to be welded on there, and it busted free and started spinning. No big deal. Once I got the cross member out, I heated this up with the torch and got it off. But what we got to do is we got to get all these threads cleaned up, get this guy in here, and get him welded back in there. So it's a captive nut again. And I kind of think I'll maybe clean this side up and just put a couple of tacks on it. Now, of course, these bolts are going to be all cleaned up and have lots of anti-seize on them when they go back in. But there we are. We got the captive nut welded back into this motor mount. And I touched up the weld on the one on this end. And then what I got to do is all the bolts that are related to this and the fore and aft cross member, they all screw straight up into the subframe and the bottom of the rad support. And they are like a known issue on these vans in the rust belt for getting stuck in there and breaking off and causing all kinds of grief. So we're going to make sure we get all those bolts cleaned up on the wire wheel. And you know me and my anti-seize, they'll be covered in it when they go back in. And there's the fore and aft cross member all back in. Everything's tightened up. It's kind of an ugly looking thing, but it's solid. It's just ugly. Now the last thing we got to do under here is this heat shield here. This heat shield goes back there. Where's the light? Oh, it's really hard to see. But the spare tire on these cars is basically between the front seats. So that heat shield protects the spare tire from the heat of the exhaust. Now up top here, we've got a couple of final things to do. Way down in there, I'm going to see if I can get up on my stool here. Way down in here, this is the module for the ABS brakes. You can see it's flopping around. It's supposed to be bolted to the leg of the K-frame. Of course, we had to unbolt that when we dropped the K-frame out. So I got to reach in there, get the 3 bolts installed. Once that's done, we can go ahead and get the battery tray and the battery back in. Then we can start putting the front suspension back together. And I know I keep going on and on like a broken record, but I cannot stress this enough. If you live in the Salt Belt, every single bolt that you take out of your car, clean it with the wire wheel and put anti-seize on it when you put it back together. Because you never know if this is the last time you'll ever have to take this apart or not. And man, the stuff, it just turns to rust so fast. Especially once they've been, these bolts, you can see here that the silver up on the top threads that aren't rusty yet. That's like a zinc coating that these bolts come with that's supposed to keep them protected. Here you can see it better on this bolt. And it does last a while until the salt eventually breaks it down and wrecks it. So now, those bolts, these ones here, so this van is, I don't know, whatever, it's 2016, so it's 9 years old. Maybe for the first few years of its life, that coating protected these bolts a bit. But now when they go in, there's no coating at all. So we have to make sure they're protected from seizing. So yeah, we go through lots of anti-seize around here, but it's well worth it. Okay, we got this stuff all together up top here now. I won't hook up the battery till we're ready to fire it up, but that's the last thing I got to do under here. Now we can go ahead and get the front suspension and everything all back together. I'm not going to put the brakes on. That'll be in the next video. We're going to do all the brakes and a bunch of kind of maintenance stuff before we actually start the engine up. Here's our control arms and our sway bar links. I had bought ahead of time before I started this job. I bought new sway bar links because, well, most of the time you have to cut them off to get them out. But these ones, I managed to get them apart. And they're still good and tight. The ends are good and tight. So we're just going to put these ones back on. And we'll save our new ones for one day when one of these things starts clunking. No sense using up new parts that we don't need. Same thing for the control arms. I didn't buy new control arms. I bought ball joints and bushings for them. But there's absolutely nothing wrong with these. The ball joints are good and tight. And these bushings, as you can see, when they go bad, you'll see them, they'll get cracked around there. And this inner part will actually separate from the rest of it. Or sometimes they'll separate around here, or even here where they're vulcanized. This one you can see a little bit, but it's fine. Seen a lot worse than that. And the front bushing, or the pivot bushing, same thing with that. You'll see rubber start spewing out of them if they get bad. This one's fine. You'll also notice when they're bad that the sleeve in the center will be sitting cockeyed, you know. It won't be parallel with the A-arm anymore. So, same thing. We're going to save our new parts. Over there, we've got, from our scrap van, we've got another pair of control arms that we can fire our new parts into anytime we want and change them. And from taking the van apart the first time, I realized how easy these things actually are to change. So, we're not going to worry about that right now. We're just going to put our original assembly line parts right back in. Once we got the control arm in, we can install the bolts and torque them. The up and down bolt and the pivot bolt both torque to 114 foot-pounds because they're the same size. Now, theoretically, you should not torque the pivot bolt until the car is at rest, at ride height on the ground. Well, how are you supposed to do that, right? So what we do is there's a little bit of a workaround for that. Number one, once you tighten the rear one, that's going to kind of hold the control arm straight out like it needs to be. And if we get it, you can see there, so it's aiming just slightly down. That's where we want it to be when we torque it. And that'll have it close enough to ride height that it's not going to be a problem. So the problem is, if you torque that bolt with this thing down here or up here like that, when it actually gets to ride height, it puts a lot of twist into the bushing and it will eventually wreck the bushing. But this, sitting right there like that, is just where we want it. We can go ahead and tighten it there without any problem. Now on this side, the transmission does get in the way a little bit, but what I found, if you have a torque wrench with a thin head like this one is, and a shallow socket, I just get a jack under the transmission and push it up against the rubber mounts. There's a lot of squish in these rubber mounts. It gives you just enough room that you could get your torque wrench on that bolt and get it torqued up. We're nearly there. Come on. There we go. And then the back ones are easy. You just do it from here and hold it with a wrench. Okay. Now we've got the knuckle sitting on the lower ball joint stud here. So the procedure for this is, don't ask me how they came up with this, but it's 20 foot-pounds and then 180 degrees. So we'll do that. There's our 20 foot-pounds. Okay, now get the Johnson bar here and we'll do 90 twice, right? That's 180. There's one. That's not quite a whole one. We'll give it a little bit more. There we go. And that satisfies that. Now what we're going to do is get our spline here covered with anti-seize, and then we'll spin this around, get the axle engaged in that, and then we can get the cinch bolts installed. So we got these guys in now. And the spec for these is 65 foot-pounds and then an additional 90 degrees. Don't ask me how they come up with this stuff. But that's how they want it done. So we'll have to do 245s because we can't get a 90. There we go. There's that one. And there's that one. I wish they would just give me an actual torque spec, but what are you going to do? That's not what they did. So now we've got our sway bar links back in. And what's very important with these is to get them torqued. They have to be torqued up properly. These ones, the torque spec is 65 foot-pounds. And I made darn sure they got 65 foot-pounds on them. Because if these things get loosened up at all, they'll start rattling around and egg out these holes to the point where the only way to fix it is weld a washer to it to go back to kind of a nominal, to get back to a round hole. Or I've seen the nut welded to the strut. It's just bad. And if it eggs out the sway bar, that's even worse. So we got those torqued up properly, and we should be all set. I'm going to wait to tighten these guys up until I've got the brakes on so I could stick a punch in the rotor and keep it from turning, and we'll get those torqued up to what they should be. And I guess that's going to about wrap it up for this one because I got all new brakes to put on it. So we're going to do that in the next video. And we've got a few other things to do to it. So I guess that will wrap it up for this one. So we're gaining on it. We've done a whole bunch of work, man, to get that transmission changed. But we did stuff we didn't really have to do, like all that dropping the K-frame and everything. But I wanted to get that stuff out, get all the bolts fixed up. So like I said before, I keep saying over and over, if we ever have to take this thing apart later sometime down the road, these bolts are going to come out. You don't want to start snapping K-frame bolts in the frame or that fore and aft cross member. I saw a picture on... I'm in the Grand Caravan group on Facebook, and there was a guy trying to work on his van, and he'd managed to twist that thing off. And well, now you're in a world of poo poo now. Now you got a twisted off bolt in your subframe, you know. Anyway, it is what it is. That's what happens when you live in the salty Great White North. Anyway, I'm gonna go now. I'd like to thank you as always for tuning into the Claremont Classic Garage. I hope you'll come back and see us again. And until then, I'm Kevin saying so long for now.